How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Samach Dalet, Daf 64 of Masechta BavaMetzia. Friends. Your friends. 1 second. Alright, I'm back. Daf 64. We start off with something awesome, and then there's another Mishnah on Daf Samach Dalet Amud Beis, and then I'd like to get a head start on tomorrow's daf, because it's not super difficult, and I think it would just be good to get a head start. I think we've got a lot to do tomorrow. So what else can I tell you? Yeah, whatever. It's a good daf. Ribbis related, kind of awesome BavaMetzia stuff. Okay, we're going to start in Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis, about 15 or so lines from the bottom at the 2 dots. Omer of Nachman says of Nachman, Klola de Rebisa, Kol Agar Notar Le Oser. Chevra, this is big. I think it's really big. I feel like this is, at the very beginning of the parak, we had a definition of ribis, which is basically you're getting more than you gave, right? The oraisa ribis is, Ruvain lends Shimon $100 and says, you're going to give me back 120. So he's getting back more than he gave. Or in other words, that which he didn't give him, in a sense. Now here's like another important thing of this. When does that apply? When is that relevant? So it says of Nachman, ribis applies when you're charging more because you had to wait. And this is important. It's important for today. It's going to be important in the future. It's an important definition of that we can apply to ribis, which is that ribis applies when you're charging extra or even giving a discount. Meaning, if the seller is charging extra, if a loaner is charging extra because he had to wait to get paid back, or even if a seller gives a discount to a customer, as we're going to see, a seller gives a discount to a customer since the customer has to wait. Any kind of sort of change in value, any kind of benefit that goes to somebody who has to wait, we have to be concerned about interest, right? Right. So basically, if Ruvain lends Shimon $100 and says, pay me back in a month, $120, and basically, so the loan isn't due today, obviously. The loan, that would be pointless, right? The whole point is that Ruvain needs to spend the money and needs some time to get it back to make back the money Shimon needs to spend the money and needs some time to make back the money to pay back Ruvain. So therefore, the loan isn't going to be due for another month. And in the meantime, Ruvain's sitting around waiting for his money. So if Reuven says to Shimon, when you pay me back in a month, when the loan is due, pay me back more than I gave you, that's interest. Now, if there would be a scenario where he doesn't actually have to wait, as I think it's going to come up maybe tomorrow, what would be an example of that? I don't know, for example, if I sell you my house, right, and I say, if I sell you my house and I can give you kind of I think if I sell you my house, right, and I say, look, if you pay up front right now, you could buy it for $1,000, but if you pay in installments, then it would be kind of, let's say, monthly installments of $100. I think that would be okay since the payment is due now, right? And you're not saying, well, since I have to wait for my money. No, the payment is really due now, and what you're really doing is saying $1,000 is the actual price, right? And but if you want to kind of pay it in installments, I don't remember exactly the case. I think it comes up in tomorrow's Gemara. But the point is that that is going to be an important definition, that ribis applies when the difference in money is because the person had to wait either to receive his goods or to get paid back a loan, because you had to wait in order to collect, let's say by a loan, your money. So that is why you are charging more, and that's what interest is. Okay. So 1 second. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. So now, so back in the Gemara, Amar of Nachman, says of Nachman, Klala de Rabisa, Kol Agar Notar Le Osir. So a general rule when it comes to ribis, to interest, is that if a person is charging more because he had to wait, so that is not allowed. That is ribis. The Amar of Nachman, says of Nachman, Haiman de Yoiv Zuze Lekeroa. A person who gives a zuz to a wax monger, person who sells wax. V'ka'azle dalad. And the market rate of wax is 4 waxes for a zuz. V'amarle, the wax monger says to the buyer, Yohivna loch, hey, I'll give you a deal. Instead of 5 waxes for a zuz, instead of 4 waxes for a zuz, I'll give you a better deal. 5 waxes for a zuz. So instead of each wax costing 25, a quarter of a zuz, each wax will be a fifth of a zuz. So he gives him a better deal. So isnu gabe shari. So if the wax monger has all the waxes, well then sure, what's the problem? He's basically selling him wax at a discounted price. That's completely fine. However, leisnu gabe, but if the wax monger doesn't have it, and he's going to have to go get it and deliver it to the buyer at a later point. So at this point, so now basically the buyer is receiving a discount, a better deal because he has to wait. That is also, that is not allowed, right? So we see, right, that if the sale is happening right now, right, and the wax monger has the wax and he can fill the order now, so then he can give a discount. He can give whatever discount he wants. But if the wax monger says, "Look, I can't fill your order right now. It's going to take some time till I receive the wax, but I'll give you a better discount because you're waiting," that is a problem. So pshita, this is obvious that if he doesn't have it and the buyer is going to have to wait, then that's going to be an issue of ribis. So lo tzricha de isle ashrai b'mata. Well, the chiddush here is that it's talking about where, right? Meaning, because we know already that, right, that you can't kind of forward money for, right, that forwarding money when you don't have it, and especially because he's not giving him the standard rate, right? Meaning, we talked about, right, that you could forward money to a monger at the market rate, even if he doesn't have it. But here he's giving him a discounted rate. And that's not okay if the wax monger doesn't have the wax. But here it's talking about where, sure, the wax monger doesn't have the wax, but his suppliers have already agreed to give him to supply him with wax. Like he just needs to pick it up. So he has everything lined up. He doesn't have the wax right now, but he's going to go to his suppliers and he's going to get wax. But it's still a problem. Right? So he has credit in the city that he just needs to go and pick up his wax and fill the order. So since he has suppliers who are going to supply him with wax, so that should be similar to the scenario that we saw the other week, which is that while I think this is in the context of Saw B'Saw, it's going to come up probably in like a week or so from now, maybe a week and a half, that so I think this was in the context of Saw B'Saw, that Reuven can't loan to Shimon a saw of wheat and say, Shimon, pay me back, in a month from now, a saw of wheat, because the value of a saw of wheat might increase. But if Shimon says, look, I need you to lend me a saw of wheat. I have a saw of wheat. It's in my granary. I just need my son to come, or I have to find the key, or whatever it is. Like, I have it. I'll give it right back to you when I can. Then that would be okay. So I may have thought that we would say a similar thing over here. That since he has suppliers who are ready to supply him with wax, so that would be considered kind of like a situation when he's like, well, I just need my son to come home, or I need to find my key. That's it. Which is okay. So we may have thought that here as well, it would be okay for the wax monger to give this discount. So kamashman, that since the fact of the matter is that the wax monger does not have the wax right now, he has to go to his suppliers and retrieve it and pick it up. So that is not okay, and it's an issue of ribis since he doesn't have it. Wow. I thought this was going to be an easier daf. I mean, this wasn't so hard, but I guess when it comes to ribis, there's a lot of details and things are very technical. So we still haven't even started Samach Daled yet, and already 10 minutes into the daf, but alright, fine. The Omer of Nachman says, Rav Nachman, Ayman de Ozev Pshite Mechaver. Says Rav Nachman, if Ruvain lent, or Shimon, let's say, borrowed some money from Reuven, not a lot of money. Shimon borrowed some money from Reuven. And it turns out it's a little bit more. I don't know. He was borrowing $10 from Shimon was borrowing $10 from Reuven. It turns out that there was a little bit more. So if it's an amount that you can assume that Reuven made a mistake, okay, well then Shimon needs to return it to Reuven. Reuven didn't intend to give him more than he was meant to. Ve'ilav, but if it's not the kind of thing that would be attributed to a mistake, matona ba'amahu to yoivle, so then, then it's a gift. Enjoy, Shimon. Heichidami bichdei shadas toeh. What is an example of? What does it mean for? What would be a? How would you know that it was like a mistake and you have to return it? So Rav Acha Brei to Rav Yosef be'isur Yosef v'chum shiasa. If it was, I think there might be different ways to understand this. I read this, I think, in the Art Scroll. Rashi explains, Tosfos, I don't know. Basically, if it's off by a number divisible by 5 or by 10, you can assume that they made a mistake because maybe he was counting like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30. And maybe like he, let's say, did 30 twice, and now you or let's say he said 40 when he meant 30, and now it's, or no, I guess let's say he said 30 twice, so then he would be giving you more. So if it's the multiples of 5 or 10, kind of different ways that people count in fancy ways. So, but nobody's counting in multiples of like 4. And therefore, so, if Shimon was borrowing $10 from Reuven and he got 14, so then you can assume that it's not a mistake, it was intentional, and just like, enjoy your gift. But if he asked for 10 and he got 15, so maybe he was counting in multiples of 5 and messed up or something. Alright. And he would have to return that. But now what if Reuven is not really such a nice guy? He's not the kind of guy that gives gifts. So, I mean, if Shimon asked for 14, for 10 and Reuven gave him 14, he's probably not giving him a gift. So then what? Do you assume that it's a mistake? So, Omalei, so Ravashi says, Dilma migzul gazle ve'avlele becheshbon. Well, yeah, but maybe if Reuven isn't such a nice guy, so why is he giving Shimon 14 instead of 10? Well, maybe Reuven stole from Shimon, and he's paying him back. And he's just, when Shimon asks for 10, Reuven says, you know what? I stole $4 from Shimon. I'll just include it in the 10, and we're even. The Tana's we learn in the Brisa, that if somebody steals from his friend and then just throws it into some other cheshbon, includes it in there, and that way he paid him back, that is acceptable. But what if Reuven is not somebody who Shimon knows, right? Somebody who came from outside of the city, and he's not somebody who he's ever seen before, who would have robbed him. So then why would he be giving him this, if he's not such a nice guy, and he wouldn't necessarily be giving a gift, and he definitely didn't rob you, so then why assume that it's a gift? So Amalei, so Rashi says, Dilma inish achrino gazle, well, maybe somebody else stole from him. Amalei, and the thief said to this guy who's giving the money, Kiyazev ploni pshite minoch, if so-and-so borrows money from you, avlele b'cheshbon, just include the amount that I stole from him in the amount that you give him. So, alright, so if it's some amount that may be attributable to a gift, you can attribute it to a gift. Fine. Omar, or at least maybe to returning of theft or whatever it is, but he can keep it. Rav Kana says, Rav Kana have a Yosivna b'shilei Pirkei Rav. Says Rav Kana, I walked in late and got there just for the end of Rav's shir. Vishmais dika Omar, and I heard Rav was Kare was talking about gourds. I had no clue. Gourds. What's the shir about? What's he talking about? Gourds. I didn't know what Rav was talking about, says Rav Kana. But to come Rav, and then after Rav finished giving the shir, Amrilu, I said to the people that were at the shir, my Kari, what is this whole thing about gourds? What was Rav talking about? Dika Amar Rav. Amrli. So Rav Kana reports, he says over that they said to me, Hachikam Rav, this is what Rav was talking about. Hi man diyoiv zuze legino akare. That if a person gives money to a gardener, a farmer, for a gourd, person gives money to a farmer for gourds. Right, so he gives a zuz to a farmer for gourds. And at the time it was the market rate was 10 small gourds for a zuz. 10 small gourds for a zuz. Ve'omerle, and the gardener says, the farmer says, Yohivna loch b'nei garmida. Look, if you wait for the gourds to grow, so then I will I'll give you, so you pay me now, but I'll give you in the future 10 gourds for the same zuz. I'll give you 10 gourds that are an amma long rather than these smaller ones. Isnu shari. So if the farmer has gourds that are that size, that are an amma long, well then that would be no problem because he has it. But lesnu osir. But if he doesn't have the gourd, if he only has small gourds right now, and he's basically saying that I'll give you a discounted price because you're waiting for these gourds to become an amma long, that is going to be a problem because he doesn't have amma long gourds right now, and you're basically getting a discount because you're waiting. Pshita, that's obvious, right? Yeah, of course, right? That's Rav Nachman's definition of ribis. That if there's a benefit to the person, a financial benefit to a person who waits, that is interest. So Ma'adatema may have thought to say, Kavan de Mimele Karabu. Yeah, but the thing is, right now the farmer has the gourds. They're small right now, but just wait and they're going to grow. Meaning it's not like he doesn't have them. He does have them. They're just small right now. Eventually they're inevitably going to become big, and they're the same exact gourds. So maybe it should be treated like he does have it, and that would be acceptable. So Shapir Dami, I might think it's okay. Kamash Malan. So the chiddush is that Kiman. Wait, what? So Kamash Malan, that so therefore the chiddush is that even though he does have the gourds right now, they're small, but if eventually they're going to be those big gourds that he's talking about. So I might think that would be acceptable to accept a discount, to receive a discount for waiting. Kamash Malan, that no, it's unacceptable since they aren't currently they are not currently an amalong. Come on, who's this like? Yeah, Tana. It's like the following Tana. The Tana that we're learning about. If a person is going to milk his goats, v'ligzos as v'chelav, or to shear his ooze, v'lirdos as kavroso, or to de-honey a honey thingy. Mitzo chavero, and now along the way, on his way, he finds his friend, v'amarlo, and he says to him, or his friend finds him, but v'amarlo, and the guy who's going to do these activities says to his friend, Masha'izai cholvos machur lecha, I will sell to you whatever milk my goats produce. Mashir chelai gozos machur lecha, I will sell to you whatever wool my ooze wool. Masha kavrasi rode machor lach, or I'll sell to you whatever my honey thing. Mutter, that is acceptable. Because, right, even at a discounted price or whatever, meaning it's acceptable even though he's only going to deliver them he's going to deliver them later on, but it's acceptable because the buyer is accepting not just, if there ends up being a lot, but also if there ends up being a little, right? Meaning, on the one hand, it could be problematic if he accepts a price now and then it ends up being a lot more honey, right? He's just saying however much honey there is, or however much wool there is, or however much milk there is, I'll give it to you. If it turns out that there's a ton of milk, ton of honey, ton of wool, so then maybe it could be ribis. He's getting more value than he gave. But at the same time, what if there's a little bit? So because there's that risk, maybe it'll be more, but maybe it'll be less. So therefore, he can accept this sort of just flat rate now, even before he has done these activities. Aval, but im amar lo, if he says to the friend, Masha iva izai cholvos kach v'kach mocher lecha, but if he says that whatever milk I milk from the goats, I'll give to you at a discounted price, or whatever wool I shear from the ooze, I will give to you at a discounted price. And whatever honey from the honey thingies, I will give to you at a certain amount at a discounted price. Osir, that is going to be a problem, and because he's delivering them in the future, and therefore he's basically giving him a discounted price for waiting. And even though these are things that are going to grow on their own, right? For example, the milk is just going to kind of grow on its own, right? Just produce, right? The goats produce milk. The ooze produce wool. So we see that ribis, right, meaning giving a discount for having to wait, is a problem of ribis. It's an issue of ribis, even when there are things that are going to happen on their own. Okay, so the less new be'ayishaita, since they are not, currently available, osir, they are forbidden. Those who say Amar Rava says Rava came to Memela Karavu Shapridami. Those who say that actually what happened was that when it came to the gourds, Rava said that since the gourds are going to grow on their own, it's acceptable. So actually Rava said that when it came to the gourds, the opposite. He said that if the farmer said, hey, if you pay me now and wait, I'll give you gourds that are an amma long. So Rava said that that's acceptable since the gourds exist right now. Just wait, and inevitably, the gourds, right? The amma long gourds exist right now, just not an amma long. But give them time, and inevitably, these same gourds will be an amma long, and therefore it is not an issue of ribis because it's considered that he has them currently, just in smaller form. V'atanya kach v'kach osir. But what about the brisa that we just quoted with the ooze and the goats? That even though milk and wool are things that kind of happen on their own, still we said it's an issue of ribis. So hasam lab minei karabu the shakle le lahai ba'asi achrina beduchte. Hacha minei karabu the chishakle le lahai lo asi achrina beduchte. There's a difference between the gourds and, let's say, milk, right? The gourd, meaning if you would harvest the gourds right now, there wouldn't be any gourds for you later on that are going to be an amma long, right? The amma long gourds are these exact gourds that are there right now that inevitably will be an amma long. It's these same exact gourds by definition. If you were to harvest the gourds right now, you wouldn't have any gourds that will be an amma long, right? So therefore, it's obvious that it's these gourds that you're going to be, that you're waiting for, but they already exist now, just in smaller form, and inevitably they will be a amma long, and that is what you're buying right now. When it comes to, let's say, the milk, for example, the milk that you will ultimately be receiving is not inherently connected to whatever milk that exists right now. Theoretically, you could milk the goat and it'll produce more milk, and you can receive that milk, right? It isn't, I guess, by definition, that the milk that you will be receiving is necessarily a product of sort of the future state of the milk that is there right now. It could be completely different milk, and therefore it is not considered like it exists right now, and you would not be able to sort of pay now at a discounted rate. But by the gourds, Rava, according to this way of viewing it, Rava would say that you would be able to get a discounted rate because they exist right now, albeit in smaller form. Amar Abaye says, Abaye, shari le leinish lemeimer le lechavre. A person is allowed to say to his friend, Heilach arba'a zuze achavisa dechamra. A person is allowed to say to his friend, here, right, so Reuben could say to Shimon, here are 4 zuz for this barrel of wine. He already has, right, Shimon has the barrel of wine. Reuben says, look, I'm giving you 4 zuz for that barrel. Now, itokva, if it goes bad, if it becomes vinegar, b'shusach, it's in your possession, it's your loss. Iyikara, but if it goes up in value, zila, or if it goes down in value, b'shusi, then that'll be on me. Amalei of Sherevia la'abai, says of Sherevia to Abai, Hai karv l'socher v'rachuk le'efsedu. But wait, this is not an acceptable deal. This is where he's saying that if it becomes vinegar, it's your loss. If it increases in value, it's my gain. So that is not that is not acceptable. What is if you look at the third line of Rashi, it says, right, it says the shaku ribis, that would be considered like he's taking ribis. The chayvin de'enu mekabel olav achrayis hamekach, since he's not accepting upon himself sort of the responsibility for the purchase, the risk of the purchase. Nimtza she'ein zeh mecher, it's not a sale. Umos halva, and therefore the money that he's giving Shimon is a loan. Etzlo v'krevas hasocher machmas ribis hu, and therefore kind of this sort of benefit that he's getting is going to be considered interest, right? Since he's not accepting, right, if it becomes vinegar, he's saying, I'm not accepting responsibility, so it's not a proper sale. So it's more like he's kind of loaning the money to Shimon, and therefore if the wine goes up in value, it's going to be considered like he's getting more than he gave. So therefore it should not be acceptable. So Amar Lei, so Abaye responds, came to Makabel Allah alei zola karv lozev velozehu. Abaye points out, wait, you're leaving out an important point. He also accepted upon himself that if it decreases in value, that's his loss as well. I said if it becomes vinegar, I'm not responsible. But if it increases in value, that's my benefit. But if at the same time, if it decreases in value, it's my loss. So he is accepting risk, and therefore it is not an issue of interest. Says the Mishnah. Okay, I want to go now from one Mishnah to the next Mishnah. It's about halfway through Samachay Amud Aleph, is where I would like to end. I think tomorrow us will probably be happy about that, and it's a good flow. It's not particularly hard. I guess it's like kind of similar to like the daf up until now. Not particularly hard, but I guess you gotta keep in mind. Whatever. It's not that hard. Says the Mishnah, Hamavis chavero lo yidor b'chatzero. If Reuven lends $1,000 to Shimon, he shouldn't live in Shimon's property for free, chinam, for free. Because when Shimon pays him back the $1,000, Reuven's going to receive the $1,000 plus the benefit of having lived on his property. Nor can Reuven rent it from Shimon for a discounted price. Because again, he's getting when he gets paid back, he'll be getting paid back plus whatever discount he received on the rental. Mipnei shurib is because these are issues of interest. Rav Yosef says the Gemara, says Rav Yosef Amanyomi Rav Nachman Afal Pisha Muchevet. This is a sugya from Bavakama zenene v'zeh lo chaser. Reb Neil liked that sugya, and so this is the sugya. We're quoting it here as well. Amar Rav Yosef Amanyomi. So Rav Yosef Amanyomi. Amar Rav Nachman. Afal pisha amru hadar b'chatzar chaveru shlomidatu in otzarich la'alos lo socher. Even though we say that in a situation of zenenev zelo chaser, that if Ruvain needs a place is looking for a place to rent, a place to live, and Shimon has a property that he's not doing anything with, he's not renting it out or anything, it's just kind of empty. So we say that Ruvain can live there and he wouldn't have to pay Shimon. Okay, so that if Ruvain lives on Shimon's property without Shimon knowing and without paying Shimon, he wouldn't have to pay Shimon. However, if Ruvain had lent money to Shimon, well then, Vidar B'Chatzer, if he lives in Shimon's property, Tzarech Lalos Lo Socher, he would have to pay Shimon. He can't do that, right? If Ruvain lent $1,000 to Shimon, he can't live in Shimon's property for free, even if it's Zanen V'Zelo Chaser, because then he will be receiving in return the repayment of the loan plus the benefit, the value of having lived in his property for free. What's the chiddush here? Tanina, that's exactly what our Mishnah already says. That somebody who lends money to his friend, lo yidu b'chatzer chinam, he should not live in his chatzer for free. And nor can he rent for a discounted price, because it's ribis. Well, look, if we only had our Mishnah hava amino, I might think that's a situation. Maybe that's specifically in a situation when Ruvain, the loaner, needs a place to live, and Shimon is renting out his place. So Shimon can't give Ruvain the rental for free because that's real value, right? Shimon is paying back Ruvain not just the $1,000 of the loan, but also he's forfeited making money on his property. Right? That's additional value that he's giving to Ruvain. But I might think Aval Chotzer to Lokai Agra. But what if Shimon doesn't usually rent out his property? Or what if Ruvain doesn't really need a place to live? He has a different place to live. So maybe it's not considered real value then. And maybe even if Ruvain lent Shimon $1,000, he would be able to live in Shimon's property for free in that scenario where Shimon wasn't looking to rent it out, or Ruvain didn't really need to rent it out. Maybe that would be okay. Maybe that would be okay. Kamash Malon. So therefore, what Rav Nachman is saying is that in no situation would Ruvain be able to live in Shimon's property for free if he was waiting for the repayment of his loan. Ika da'amrei. So those who say Amr Rav Yosef Amanyomi, Amr Rav Nachman Afal Pisha Amru Hadar b'Chatzer Chaver Shlo Midaitu Netzarech Lalos Lo Socher. That even though we generally say that that Ruvain would be able to live in Shimon's property as long as Shimon wasn't renting it out. Halveini v'dor b'chatzerai tzarech la'alos lo socher. However, if Shimon said to Ruvain, "Look, Ruvain, how about this? I need $1,000. If you loan me $1,000, I'll obviously pay you back. But you can also live in my chotzer." So he's mamish baking it in to the loan, right? So he's basically committing at the time of the loan to pay him back, plus he'll let him live in his property. So that is not allowed. So where am I? So eno tzarich lalos halveini v'dor b'chatzer tzarich lalos lo socher. Man de'omer halveyu hilveyu kol shekein halveini. So according to the first way, which is that even after the fact, right? Even in a scenario where Reuven had already loaned Shimon the money, just a regular loan, Reuven gives him $1,000, Shimon needs to pay him back $1,000, and then after the fact, Reuven needs a place to live, he can't go and live in Shimon's property for free. So if you say that that's a problem, certainly when it's baked into the actual transaction, to the actual loan conditions, is that I will then live in your property for free in addition to being paid back, obviously that's going to be a problem. But according to the opinion who says it's dafka a problem when it's baked into the loan itself, to the loan conditions itself, but in a situation where the loan had already transpired, that could be okay. If the loan was already transpired, just a regular non-interest loan, and then after the fact, Reuven needs a place to stay, maybe that could be okay for him to stay in Shimon's property for free. My time outcome came to me because since at the time of the loan, that wasn't the intention. There was no interest at the time of the loan. It was just a regular old interest-free loan. Reuven gave Shimon $1,000. Shimon needs to pay back Reuven $1,000. And then after the fact, Reuven needed a place to stay. That could be okay if you say that the issue is dafka when it's baked into the loan itself, but if at the time of the loan there was no mention of staying in anybody's property, that could be okay according to that view. Rav Yosef Bar Chama Tokif Avde de Inshe de Masik Buzuze. We've seen this in BavaMetzia, that Rav Yosef Bar Chama, when he was owed money, he would take. So if Rav Yosef Bar Chama lent money to Shimon, he would then take Shimon's eved and put him to work. So again, if Yosef Bar Chama Tokif Avde de Inshe de Masik Buzuze, when people owed him money, he would take their avodim, ve'avid behu avidta, and put them to work for him. Amalei Rava Brei. So Rava says to his father, "My time avid marachi. How can you do this?" Amalei Yosef Bar Chama says, "Well, this isn't ribis. I'm not the one getting benefit here. Actually, the truth is, Shimon who owes me money, he's the one who's getting benefit." Anak Rav Nachman severely, because I would like Rav Nachman to Amar Rav Nachman avdenum kreise lo shavi, that an eved isn't even worth the money that you spend on his food. Right? An eved, you spend all this money to keep him fed. He doesn't really provide. The value that he provides for the adon is less than the amount that the adon spends on his food. So the truth is that Shimon, who I lent money to, is actually happy for me to take his eved, because when the eved is working for me, I'm feeding him. And like this, he's actually ahead of the game. So it's not, I'm not the one getting benefit here. Here he is. To which Rava responds, one second. Look, who's the one who's saying this? Rav Nachman is saying, Avdenum kreise lo shavi. Emid Amar Rav Nachman could go on Dari Avde. Look, Rav Nachman, everybody knows who's Rav Nachman's Eved? Dari. Dimirakid Bekovi. He was a a jester in the taverns. In Rav Nachman's case, yeah, sure. Dari was not, worth providing as much value as Rav Nachman was spending on his meals. But Abde Achrine Miyamar, would Rav Nachman say about avodim in general? Avodim work hard, and of course they're worth the investment in their food. So therefore, you can't just take somebody's eved and put him to work. You're going to be benefiting from his eved, from the work that the eved is doing. So Amar le'anaki hoder of Daniel bar Rav Katina Amarav Svirli. So says Rav Yosef Bar Chama, yeah, but I hold like Rav Katina, like Rav Daniel bar Katina bar Rav Katina Amarav. The Amar atokef avdo shel chaver v'asu b'melacha potter. If a person takes his friend's eved and puts him to work, potter, he doesn't have to pay the friend for taking his eved. Why? Look, the friend will be happy. He doesn't want an eved who's going to get lazy and sit around. If you're going to take him and put him to work, he doesn't mind. Keep the eved working, keep him in work mode. So that would be acceptable. And therefore, Rav Yosef Bar Chama says it's not a problem that if I lent money to Shimon that I go and take his eved. He's happy. Look, he wants his eved to be in work mode. He doesn't want him sitting around and getting lazy. So Omar Lei, but Rava says to his father, he says, 1 second, but still, okay, look, okay, I can understand, if the person taking the eved doesn't, if the adon doesn't owe money to the person who's taking the eved, but you, since you're taking the eved from somebody who owes you money, Merzek ribis, it looks like ribis. The Amr of Yosef, Barmanyomi, Amr of Nachman, Alpha Pishamra, Adar Bachatzer, Chaver Shlo Midaito, Eno Tzarech Lalos Lo Socher, Ilveyu, Vidar Bachatzer, Tzarech Lalos Lo Socher, Amalei Hajibi. Says Rava, look, wait, 1 second. We know though that when it comes to somebody who's loaned money, things that would normally be acceptable are all of a sudden not okay. So for example, right, we know a person can live in somebody else's chotzer if it's as long as it's not for rent, he can live in his chotzer and he doesn't have to pay him. But if he had lent him money, then he would have to pay him, because otherwise it looks like ribis. So therefore we would say the same thing here. Even though in general, sure, maybe you could take somebody's evid and put him to work because the Adam will be happy that he's not sitting around getting lazy. But things are different when that person owes you money, because then it looks like ribis. It's merzek ribis. It looks like ribis, and that's a problem. So his father says, Rav Yosef Bar Chama says, all right, I take it back. I won't do this anymore, because you're right. It looks like ribis. Omer Abai, says Abai, Haman demasik zuze de ribisa bechavre v'ka'az lechite arba grivi bezuza beshuka v'yoiv lei'iu chamisha ki mafkinon minei arba'a mafkinon minei idach o zulehu de kamozil gabe. Or there's a different girsa that says v'idach matanu de yoiv le, which I like. It's just a little bit easier, I think, to explain that way. Rav Amar chamisha mafkinon minei de meikard b'toras rebisa asoy liyadei. Okay, let's talk about this outside first, and we'll read it again. This is talking about a scenario where Ruvain lent Shimon, let's say 10 zuz, okay, and it's what's it called? It's ribis ktsutza, right? It's pashit. It's just regular classic textbook ribis. Ruvain lent 10 zuz to Shimon and says, Shimon, when you pay me back in a month from now, pay me back 11 zuz. Shimon says, fine. And now here's the thing: at the time that the loan is repaid, it's 4 grivas of wheat for 1 zuz. Okay? 1 griva of wheat is a quarter of a zuz. And Shimon says, you know what, Reuven, I'm going to pay you back the zuz of interest, but I'll actually give you a better deal. Right now it's 4 grivas of wheat for a zuz. I'll give you 5 grivas. I'll throw in an extra. So he's basically, Reuven is getting 1.25 dinars as interest, essentially, as his interest payment. So Abaye says that, so according to Rabbi Lazar, who we're going to paskin like, that when it comes to ribis ktsutza, by textbook ribis, Bezdin says to Reuven, you have to give it back to Shimon. Okay? So Shimon gave essentially to Reuven, so the ribis that they agreed upon was 1 zuz. But Shimon gave to Reuven 1.25 zuz. Right? 4 grivas would be 1 zuz, but he gave him 5 grivas, an extra quarter of a zuz of wheat. So says Abaye, when Bezdin makes Shimon return the interest, he only needs to return 4 grivas, right? 1 zuz worth of interest. The extra 0.25 that Reuven got is a gift, and he can keep that, right? The interest that they agreed upon was 1 zuz, and he has to give back 1 zuz worth of the wheat. Whereas Rave disagrees, and he says, no, he's got to give it all back, because it was all given to him in the context of the interest, right? Meaning, Shimon had said to Reuven, here's your interest, I'm going to give you wheat, and I'll give you even a little bit more. But it was all in the context of paying him that interest, therefore it all has to go back to Reuven. Let's read it inside. So Abaye says, Aman demasik zuza de rebisa bechavre, that if Shimon owes 1 zuz of ribis of interest to Reuven, because as lechite arba grive bezuza, and at the time it's 4 grivas of wheat for 1 zuz. So really, Shimon, in that respect, Shimon owes Reuven 4 grivas of wheat. Beshuka, that's the market rate. Ve'yoivle iu chamisha, but Shimon gives him 5 grivas of wheat, an extra quarter of a zuz of wheat. Kimafkinan minei, so when Bezdin makes Reuven return the ribis to Shimon, Aiba mafkinan minei, we only make him return 1 zuz worth, 4 grivas, which is the interest that was required. Idach, and what about the other griva? It was just a discount that he gave it to him, or says the Agos V'Tzudim says something which I think is a little bit easier to deal with. I think there's just less details involved. He gave it as a gift, right? The extra one is a gift. Okay. Rav Amar says, whereas Rav says, no, Reuven gives back all 5. The Meikar B'Torah Subisa, Asar Liyadeh, because at the end of the day, all of that wheat, all 5 of the grivas of wheat, were given to Reuven in the context of an interest payment, and therefore Reuven has to give it all back. Rav Abaye says, Abaye, Aman de Masik Arba Zuze de Rebisa B'Chavre, says Abaye that if Reuven lends money to Shimon, and they make up that Shimon's going to pay back the loan with interest, and the interest is going to be 4 zuz. And instead of giving Reuven 4 zuz, Shimon gives him a cloak. Gives him a cloak. Okay, very nice. So now Reuven owns the cloak. It's his cloak, right? He makes a kingdom Mashiach, it's his. Shimon gave it to him. It's Reuven's now. Reuven owns it. I hope I didn't just mess up Shimon and Reuven, right? Shimon gives it to Reuven, Reuven owns it. Kimafkinun minei. Now, when Bezin says, Reuven, you need to give back the interest to Shimon, well, he doesn't have to give back the cloak. The cloak is his. He just needs to give back what was the interest that they agreed upon. 4 zuz. So that's what he gives back. 4 zuz, but he can keep the cloak. We say, Reuven, you got to give back 4 zuz, which is the interest that you agreed upon. You can keep the cloak. Rava Amar says, Rava glima mafkidan mine. Rava says, no, Reuven needs to give back the cloak. My time how come? Ki echid lo leimu glima de machse v'koi glima de rebisahu. Because interest is something that we want to stay as far away from as possible, and we don't want people seeing, oh wow, look at Reuven's coat, he got that from Shimon, it was his interest, we don't want people talking, oh yeah, we don't want people to, be saying in any capacity, be talking about interest, be recognizing the fact that people are charging interest. We don't want anything to do with it, and therefore Rava says, do a complete reset, Reuven, give that coat back to Shimon. Amar Rava says, Rava, Aman de Masik Tresar Zuze de Ribisa Bechavre, V'agole Chotzer de Masgra Be'asora, V'agore Niale Betreser, Ki Mafkinon Mine, Treser Mafkinon Mine, Omerle, Ravacham Yedifti Ravina Velemele, Ki Agra, Hochi, De Havra, Kom Mishtarshili, Ashted Lo Mishtarshili, Ki De Agre, Kuli Amahu De Agrono, Mishum De Omerle Savrat V'kabalt. Okay, what's this talking about? This is talking about a scenario where Reuven lent money to Shimon, and the condition was that Shimon was going to repay him plus 12 zuz of interest. 12 zuz of interest. Okay, so Shimon was going to pay Reuven 12 zuz of interest. Now the thing is, Reuven has an Airbnb, and he says to Reuven, Shimon says to Reuven, Shimon, look, if you want, I have an Airbnb. You can have the Airbnb for a week. Now here's the thing. Normally the Airbnb is 10 zuz for a week. I owe you 12 zuz of interest. How about we make a deal? Use my Airbnb for a week. We'll call it interest. Essentially, and we'll call it even. Right, Reuven, you can use my Airbnb for a week. We'll call it even. Basically, essentially, normally Shimon would rent out the Airbnb for 10 zuz a week. He's basically renting it Shimon's renting it to Reuven for 12 zuz a week. Okay? And that's going to be the interest. Now, Bezdin, of course, comes and says, Reuven, you need to pay back Shimon the interest. You're not allowed to accept interest. Right? You have to pay back Shimon the interest. So now, Shimon basically says, alright, well, the interest was 12 zuz. You need to pay me back the 12 zuz of interest. Now, I know, in terms of our deal with the Airbnb, yes, normally I charge 10 zuz a week, but we agreed that I would charge you 12 zuz for the week, and that would be in lieu of the interest, but now you have to pay me back the interest. You have to pay me back. I gave you essentially 12 zuz worth of value. That's what we agreed upon, that the price was 12 zuz. So I delivered that to you. You have to give me back 12 zuz. Whereas, Reuven's going to argue, wait. You rented me your Airbnb for free. That's really, at the end of the day, that's really 10 zuz worth of value. So you gave me 10 zuz worth of value at the end of the day. that's what I want to return to you. I only received 10 zuz worth of value at the end of the day, therefore I want to return 10 zuz, not 12 zuz. So that's what's going on over here. Let's read it inside. Omar Rava says, Rava, Ayman demasik treisa zuze derbisa bechavre. If Shimon owes 12 zuz of ribis, of interest to Reuven, ve'ogar le chotzer demasgra be'asara ve'ogre nia le betreser, and then they make a deal, and Shimon says to Reuven, look, instead of me paying you 12 zuz of interest, how about this? I have an Airbnb. Normally the Airbnb is 10 zuz a week. How about this? I will rent it for you for 12 zuz for the week, and that will be in lieu of the interest. And now Bezdin is making Reuven, pay back the interest to Shimon. Kimafkinon mine, when we make Reuven pay back Shimon the interest, Tresar mafkinon mine, we make Reuven pay in full the 12 zuz of interest. Amalei, Rav Achim Difti to Ravina, says Rav Achim Difti to Ravina, but Velei Malei, let Reuven say, wait a second, I don't need to pay, why should I have to pay 12 zuz of interest to Shimon? Ki agra hachi, when I agreed to rent the Airbnb for 12 zuz for the week, that was the havaka mishtar shili, because I was benefiting from it. I was getting an Airbnb, I was getting a vacation for a week. That was okay. Now that I'm not benefiting from it, now that it's being taken away from me, wait a second, I'm not okay with overpaying for that Airbnb. I want to pay the same rate as everybody else, and I only received 10 zuz worth of value, therefore I only need to return 10 zuz worth of value. So the answer is, no, he can't make that argument because he accepted it, right? There was no tricks over here. Shimon said, look, Reuven, let's make a deal. I will, normally it's 10 zuz. I know I owe you 12 zuz. Let's call it even. I'll rent the Airbnb to you for 12 zuz and we'll call it even. And Reuven accepted that. So therefore, now when Bezdin says, hey, Reuven, you charged Shimon interest, you have to pay it back. Well, he accepted the Airbnb as 12 zuz worth of value, therefore he needs to, he sort of agreeably overpaid for it as interest, and therefore he needs to pay that back. Wow, okay, that was Daf Samach Daled of Masechta BavaMetzia. Wow, we started in Samach Gimel, we ended on Samach Hey, we learned Samach Daled. We started off with that very important rule of Rav Nachman that ribis can be sort of defined as somebody receiving more favorable financial terms for having to wait, whether that is a loaner who's saying you need to pay me back more than I gave you because I had to wait, or whether it's a buyer who's getting a discounted price because they have to wait before they receive what they their purchase. Those are both scenarios of interest, and and then we got to a new Mishnah where we kind of talked about somebody who lent money can't get any additional benefit from that person, even in scenarios where normally they would be able to get certain benefits, like Zenena v'Zelo Chaser, for example. You have to be super careful when it comes to somebody who loaned money, because then we have to be concerned about ribis. Peace out.